Hello, and thank you for tuning into the Caregiving 101 YouTube channel. And we're here today with Scott Collins from Comfort Care, and he's going to talk with us today about personal protective equipment, about not spreading COVID-19 or any other diseases and viruses amongst your caregiving team and the one you're caring for. Scott, let's see what we got.
So what I'm going to do is just go through some of the basic tools that we use every single day in protecting our caregivers, our clients, and our families from the potential exposure to COVID. Obviously, that's one of our first and foremost responsibilities, is not to create a potential for harm above, and that really allows us to get ahead of things before we even start providing care. What I'm going to do is go through kind of the escalation of the tools from the simplest, most basic, the things that should be used every single day, not just in caregiving, but in our personal lives. And then the places and times and situations where we'll move to more sophisticated tools and how they're used. So let's start with the basics. This is just a standard medical grade surgical mask that we're both wearing. And this is probably the cornerstone of protection. Again, not only in caregiving, but in our personal lives, the things that we should be putting on when we go to the grocery store or walking outside in a situation where we can't distance ourselves. But in the care of seniors, which is where our primary focus is, it becomes critical. The exposure to COVID to someone who's in their 70s, 80s, or 90s can oftentimes be fatal. And so we need to be particularly careful. So this is the very most baseline level of protection. One of the key things to remember about masks of any kind is that when you put them on, what you're trying to avoid is not just the exposure to people of your breath, but also exposure to yourself of things that might be on your hands. We're going to want to do regular hand washing and sanitizing. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But also when we put on their mask, we're holding the hands far away from our face, both putting it on and taking it off. That way you can immediately go to the step of washing or sanitizing your hands. And if you have occasion to do what we've been told not to do, which is touch your face later, you've limited your exposure. We encourage the regular use of hand sanitizers or hand washing. Hand washing is actually a little bit more effective, but you don't always have soap and water available. Fortunately, hand sanitizers have become a lot more sophisticated. This one is coconut and lemon verbena, so you can pick your scent, but the most important thing is that you're using on a regular basis. Hand washing, sanitizer, and basic medical masks or cloth masks, like we see hanging around your neck, are the cornerstones of what we do. If we get into situations which are higher in risk, where either let me be clear. The caregiver, if they're potentially exposed to COVID, should not be with the person they're providing care for. We need to come up with a backup plan. But if we think there's a chance that there was exposure with the person we're working with, we want to increase our level of protection from them while continuing to protect them from being exposed to a virus we might have. One of the next steps that's really important is the use of a more sophisticated mask. This is an N95 mask, one that's used in surgical and other medical procedures. One of the key things with this mask, obviously you still want to be putting it on appropriately, not touching your face when you put it on, but it's also important that it be fitted correctly. The top of all the N95 masks have a metal band. That metal band has to be put securely around the bridge of the nose, and then the base of the mask has to be pulled up so it's held securely in the bottom of the chin. It can be a little challenged if you've got a beard like myself, but again, the fitting is really important. The reason that is so critical is that when we're using an N95 mask in that setting, it's not just about preventing our respiration to escape, but preventing us from being exposed to anything coming out from the client or anybody else in the environment.
We don't want it to leak.
Exactly. So this provides a higher level of protection. There are other models of masks that do that, but the N95 mask is the most common in some of those high-risk situations. We also want to protect our eyes. That's another area of exposure for viruses. And so we provide our caregivers, and these are pretty easy to get. You can get them off of Amazon. That's where this came from. They're disposable, so you can actually use them for one day, throw them away. They cost about $1 each. They come with a strap that allows you to form fit them to your head. And what this does is not only provides another barrier for anything that comes in or out of our mouths, but also protects our eyes from any airborne air particles. We also, if we're worried about additional exposure, we'll move on to using of a gown. Now the gowns are just like you've seen in medical offices. They typically open to the back. It allows you to put on the gown, tie it to the back, and then when you're removing it, actually pull it out away from your clothes and prevent any exposure from things that got on the gown to getting on your clothes. You're going to want to put on the gown and the face mask and the respiratory mask before you go in to spend time working in the client or in the client's environment. We're also going to move to a higher level of protection for our hands. We're still washing, we're still hand sanitizing, but we're also using medical grade gloves to protect our hands from any potential exposure on surfaces. These are replaced as often as necessary with hand washing or hand sanitizing between every use. What this does is, again, provides us another barrier and another layer of protection. By combining these additional steps of the face shield, the gown, and the medical grade gloves, what we're doing is putting ourselves in the best position to avoid being infected by someone who may or may not be exposed. Again, this isn't our standard PPE, but if we think there's even a chance of a risk, we'll step it up. All of these things, again, put on before you walk in the door, disposed regularly, and then we bring in new gloves, new masks, and new shields every single time we're seeing that client, because we don't want the potential exposure on those surfaces to be replicated. So those are kind of the layers of escalation for this. If you have situations where you think you are at risk, definitely bring in those other pieces. They're all available now online, so it makes it a lot easier.
Thank you very much, Scott. I hope that helps with your caregiving situation. Put on your mask.
Always.